We are going to make French bread today, and as usual, I'm going to use my handy dandy KitchenAid mixer to help me do all the hard work. I'm going to have my recipe down below in the description box. So the recipe I'm going to give, I believe, makes two. I double everything and make four. So you could try to cut that in half to then just make one loaf. I've never done it though. So trust me, you're going to want to make two, three, or four. You can store them in the freezer for another time. So as usual, we're going to start any bread, not any, but most bread recipes off with warm water. A little bit of sugar or honey will work as well. And I sprinkle the yeast over top. If you are wondering what it looks like to proof your yeast, go check out my white sandwich bread video. It shows you exactly what to look for. I'm just going to jump right in because I know my yeast is good. I'm going to add my oil. I use pure olive oil, not extra virgin, but you can use any neutral flavor oil that you would like to. I sprinkle in my sugar, just like in my sandwich bread video I explained. I reserve a half a cup to a whole cup, and I will slowly incorporate that in the end. You never know exactly how many cups of flour your bread dough is going to require on any given day. The temperature in your home, the humidity, there's a lot of variables in play. So I always prefer to have a wet dough rather than too dry. So I will add in more flour later. And as is standard, I always add my salt at the very end. I've just been doing it this way for many, many years, and I've never killed my yeast doing it this way. So I just keep doing it. And I'm going to fix my KitchenAid mixer with the dough attachment hook. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, you can certainly do this by hand. It's actually great practice. I recommend it for people who have never made bread before, so you can really understand and get a feel for what your dough should feel like as you are kneading it. You cannot over knead if you're doing it by hand, so it's kind of a good thing with a KitchenAid or a Bosch machine. Sometimes you do risk potentially over kneading your bread dough. So that's just something to be careful and watch out for. So we're going to get this all incorporated. And once the dough pulls away from the sides of my glass bowl and it's one cohesive dough, I know it's ready to set the 5-minute timer to continue kneading in my glass bowl. And once that is up, I'm going to get it out of that glass bowl. I'm going to knead it by hand just a couple times just to really get a feel for my dough. Make sure it's, that loose, smooth, elasticy kind of dough that I'm looking for. This is going to feel a little different than a sandwich dough though. This should feel maybe a little more dense, if you will. You don't want a sloppy dough. You really want to make sure your dough ball really conforms together. So I sprinkled my surface here with a little bit of flour, and we're just going to get this dough out onto the work surface, and I'm going to give it a couple good turns. And when you're kneading, what you would like to do is you're going to pretty much stretch out that dough and pull out, pull in while turning simultaneously. So you're kind of stretching and working that gluten. That's the whole point of kneading. Now, the stand mixer certainly did quite a bit of that for me, so I don't need to do it too much. If I were doing it by hand, however, you would want to just slowly work it all together. It will eventually come together, so just have patience, and you can see it's not a sticky dough. If I had a ton of dough still sticking to my hand, I know I need to add a little bit more flour and continue working that dough until I can work with it without it sticking to me. If I was really struggling to kind of move this dough and stretch it out. I might be worried that maybe I added a little too much flour, but this dough feels exactly the way it should. So I'm going to kind of roll and tuck so that I can get it into a nice tight ball, because I'm going to oil my bowl where I'm going to then place my my dough for it to rise for the next hour to 2 hours. It's going to depend on how warm your house is. And I do not use the lid to this bowl. I cover it with plastic wrap. The lid would sort of restrict the ability for that dough to continue to rise. And as you will see, I had another task I was doing that day, and the dough definitely rose and got a little bit ahead of me, which is fine. It certainly wasn't over risen. In fact, this bowl was probably a little too small for what I was working with, but that's okay. You can see it's sort of flopping out over the sides. So I'm removing my rings so I can work with it a little bit better. And I'm going to punch down this dough, and we're going to start shaping our bread loaves. Now at this point in the process, the goal is to get out any air that may have been as a result of the dough rising. So we're going to knead it just a small couple of times. We're not really trying to work this dough. We're just really looking to get any air pockets removed. This will help to reduce the open nooks and crannies that could develop inside, which is really great for a English muffin dough, but not so much for our French bread. So just knead it a couple times, get it into a nice ball, and now I'm going to separate it into fourths, because the pan I'm using, of course, holds 4 loaves, which I'm going to flour so that nothing sticks to my pan. It's a very old pan, and so I very liberally apply some flour there. When you are looking to form your loaves, you're just essentially doing the same thing we did with the sandwich bread. We're going to kind of make a rectangle, and we're going to roll it out just like you would if you were making crescent rolls. No, that's not right. Not crescent rolls. Cinnamon rolls. And we're looking to keep it a little bit smaller than the actual size of the pan that you're working with, because as it does its second rise, it's going to both move up in direction and fill out, but it's also going to fill out lengthwise too. And trust me, yes, I have plenty of times made it too big to where it's spilling out over the side of my pan. You'd think I would learn my lesson after years and years and years of making it, but I still haven't. I must just be a slow learner. So keep it shorter than the size of the pan you're using, because it does get bigger. Don't worry, you will be left with very large, beautiful loaves of French bread. Now, I know we're not looking for perfection over here in this household. We want edible, and if it looks pretty, hey, that's even better. But this is a very just simple, rustic type of household. So, cover it with some sort of a tea towel, and it's going to be about 30 to 40 minutes for the second rise. Again, it'll depend on the temperature of your home. You're going to want to get ready with some egg wash, and if you have a tool to scorn your bread with, you're going to want to use that. And I don't know why the name of this right now is slipping my mind. However, this cuts through bread almost like butter, a hot knife and butter. It's really, really a wonderful, inexpensive tool to have. When I do sourdoughs and other types of breads, I can really make some very pretty designs. But for my French bread, I just like to do a couple slits. This helps preventing it to crack and break during the cooking process. So it actually is a necessary step. It isn't just for looks. And I'm going to get this dough with the egg wash. I actually realized later on that sometimes when you're balancing a couple things in the kitchen, you realize you're doing things out of order. I actually recommend doing your egg wash midway into the baking session. You're going to get a much deeper golden outer layer than what I ended up with, but it just doesn't matter, you guys. It looks prettier. It doesn't really change the flavor though. So with French bread, you put it into the oven at 425 for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you would take it out, you would then do your egg wash, and you would finish it at 375 for 15 to 20 minutes. So I don't know what I was thinking this day. It's not the first time I've done it. It won't be the last time that I do it. But I just did the egg wash ahead of time. I think I was doing a canning project, and so my mind must have just been on, hey, let's get this bread finished, because I have also risen my bread too long and had a flop because of that. So I probably was just trying to not forget about my bread. So whether you do it before it goes into the oven or midway, it doesn't matter. But I do definitely recommend an egg wash because it does make a really nice outer layer, sort of a crust that everyone just really loves. So these are going to go into an oven 425. Once they're in the oven, I take a cup of ice and I throw it down underneath. And oh, look at that. So good. And that ice in the hot oven will actually help to create that outer crust as well. So as I'm here sitting here posing with the bread, it really is not to pose for you. I was thinking I could get a thumbnail out of it, so I'll leave it in. But you want to tap on it and it sounds really hard and beautiful. It does tend to soften up over time. If you want to keep that crunch, don't cover your bread with a tea towel because that will help to soften the bread if you do that. Much like my sandwich bread, I store my French bread in a much larger and longer bread bag. So these can store very easily in the freezer. I'm missing a loaf because I sent one home with my daughter to her dad's house. And look at that. Oh, the inside is so soft and just fluffy. You could use this for French bread pizzas. We oftentimes use it for French toast in the morning. Makes fantastic French toast. You could, of course, use it for things like sub sandwiches, meatball sandwiches. We slice it on an angle and put some softened butter and just eat it with our dinner. I also will cut it long ways in half and make a garlic bread from it too. Cheesy garlic bread, regular garlic bread. I mean, whatever you guys do with a regular loaf of French bread from the store, you could certainly do with your homemade. Just make sure it is completely cooled down. Come back hours later before you wrap it up for either the pantry or for the freezer. This will store very well in your freezer for quite a while, especially if you make sure it's completely cooled all the way. This is fresh bread. We don't work with preservatives in our kitchen, and so after so many days, you'll see the quality will start to diminish a little bit, but I would say it doesn't technically go bad. For probably a good 7 days or so, you might start to see maybe some specks of mold grow. But I can promise you there is no way this bread will last you past maybe a little bit for the next day. So that should not be a concern at all. So these are going to go into the freezer and I can pull these out at anytime for any reason. And I swear, once it's defrosted, it looks like you just pulled it from the oven. I hope you give this a try, and I will see you again the next time we are in the kitchen setting up for the pantry, or we're making something good for the day to fill our bellies. I'll see you again.